Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Economies and Neighbourhoods Scrutiny panel today. We'll just start off by introducing ourselves. So I'm Harpreet, the chair of the Economies and Neighbourhoods Scrutiny panel.
I'm Lee Webb from the governance team.
Hi, Councillor Richard Eastwood from Linley Ward.
Ailey Ogden, Co-opty.
Councillor Yusuf Singh from Batley West Ward.
Richard Murgatroyd, Goker Ward.
Andrew Bird, Co-opty.
Martin Bolt, Murfield.
Councillor Graham Turner, Corporate Cabinet Member. Who's going in half an hour as a Personnel Committee meeting? Probably. You'll miss me when I'm gone. Just wait for this to finish. Right, Councillor Rob Walker.
Catherine Little, Programme Manager.
Rob Dolby, Kirklees Green Space Ops Manager.
Chris Duffield, Head of Business and Skills.
No? Okay, come on. Thank you, everybody. So, minutes of the previous meeting. Has anyone checked them? Are they okay? Yeah? Richard's giving me approval, so I'll take that then. All right, thank you, Richard. Does anyone have any interest that they need to declare? No? Andrew?
I'm interim chair of the Media Centre, so I have an interest in item 3, the digital strategy.
A form, Andrew, so if you can fill that in for us and just hand it in to Lee afterwards. Okay. The panel is open to the public. I don't think we've got any members of the public here today with us. We might have one, maybe. Welcome. No, I've got colleagues joining us, so welcome anyway. Deputations and petitions, I don't think we've got any today. No, thank you. Public question time. We've got no members of the public for questions, so we'll leave that bit. So we've got 3 items on the agenda today, folks, so we'll get through them. We can obviously extend the session as well if we need to, okay? So we're going to start off with the Kirklees Learning Skills and Employment Plan update, and we've got Christopher here who's going to give a presentation, then we'll go to questions. Is that okay?
That's great. Thank you, Chair. You've got the paper at agenda item 7, so I'm not going to go through this line by line. You'll be pleased to hear. But essentially the report is to bring the panel up to date on work which has started around the development of an all-age learning skills and employment plan for the district, and importantly, it's also an opportunity at a very early stage in the development of that document for panel to identify any issues or kind of challenges that you would like to see built into the work as that moves forward. So, in essence, what the paper does, it talks a bit about the background. It talks about the objectives that we're trying to achieve through this piece of work. There's a specific piece around construction skills and the opportunities around some of our major infrastructure projects, and then really it's asking for your thoughts on whether there are other important issues that you want to see picked up in this piece of work and how you would like to be involved moving forward. So, in summary, the decision to prepare an all-age learning skills and employment plan, working in partnership with schools, the college, the university, and whole employees and other stakeholders. Really, it's there not in any way to duplicate at all any of the existing plans and strategies that we already have in place around early years, around children and young people, around adult and community learning, but it's there as a way of complementing and adding value to those by identifying areas where we could strengthen the links between them, and in particular where we could improve the pathways for both young people and adults between different stages of learning and work. So it's very much there to add value to our existing plans and strategies in this very important area. Paragraph 2.1 just summarises the objectives that we're seeking to that we're looking to achieve through this piece of work. And again, I won't detail them all there, but hopefully that will give you a good sense of the breadth of coverage. And then the rest of the paper picks up on some of the particular issues and challenges that officers are expecting the plan to cover. And again, I won't go through all of this in detail, but just to pull out two or three. One of the interesting issues that we have in our kind of early years and key stage 1 provision, so around about primary school, overall, by the time our young people are age 16, they are sort of attaining at or above the national average, and actually our post-16 provision attaining generally well above the national or regional comparators. But we do have this interesting gap whereby the gap in performance between young people in the district and between England as a whole is wider at that early years, and it narrows then over the rest of their school life. And so that's, understanding that in more detail and understanding whether there are other interventions that, building on the good work that we're already doing, whether there are other interventions that we can put into the system earlier to narrow that gap earlier will be one of the areas of focus. There are also some whilst moving forward several steps, whilst when young people are into the 16 to 18 provision, again, our attainment is very, very good. We have some very high performing sixth forms and college. The issue, however, is still that for those young people that are perhaps less academically minded or particularly able to achieve GCSE grade 4 in English and maths, how we then ensure that they have progression into further learning and or employment is another important challenge for us. It's a national issue. It's one that we do marginally better at than the national average, but it's still an important issue for us in Kirklees. So it's how do we make sure that the pathways for people who are perhaps wanting to take a more vocational route and or who aren't able to get GCSE English and Maths first time around, that will be an important focus for the piece of work. The paper then talks about some of the other areas that we're hoping to tackle. There are some challenges around the way the apprenticeship system is working, and in particular, both for those employers who are larger employers who are subject to the apprenticeship levy, and also those small and medium-sized enterprises who aren't. And there are some challenges there in terms of how we are making best use or they are making best use of the funding which is available. The other important issue is, again, in terms of that point about progression, it's how are we ensuring that we are working with people who we're engaging with in adult and community learning, which is hugely important from the council's perspective, because we've maintained a budget and investment for that activity. We secure a small amount of funding each year from the Education and Skills Funding Agency to support adult learning, and it's all very much focused on people progressing into more formal stages of learning. So the work that we do with partners like Paddock Community Trust, Fusion Housing in the community, hugely important because we're engaging people in the community. It's then about how we then see those people that progress into further learning and work. And again, that's one of the areas that we want to focus on. And really, there are another couple of issues that we pull out in terms of themes that officers expect this piece of work will cover, but obviously very keen to get panel's views as to whether there are gaps in that and whether there are other areas or issues that you'd like us to particularly focus on. The final part of the paper covers some specific opportunities around the construction sector in particular. We know there are a number of major investment projects proposed really over the next decade, whether that's the council's investment in both Huddersfield and Dewsbury town centres, whether that's the Transpennine upgrade, whether that's the City Fibre rollout. And one of the things that we want to ensure we're able to do is to make sure that there are the right pathways for both young people and adults into those construction sector opportunities, to really make sure that local people, local businesses and communities truly benefit from that capital investment. And there are a number of ways in which we're doing that. We're looking at council's procurement processes. We're looking at the planning system and how we can work with developers around their social value commitments through planning agreements. And there's also some important work to do for us to working with the college, working with other providers to make sure that those pathways are in place. So this is a particular focus within this wider piece of work. And then really, Chair, just to flag that this piece of work will be undertaken over the next 4 to 6 months. Aim is that it will be reported to Cabinet for approval in the autumn, and we're keen for panel to have the opportunity to engage now, but also at further stages as that work progresses. So keen to hear how you'd like to do that. Thank you, Chair.
Questions coming up. I just wanted to start, if that's okay. Can I ask, how does this line up with the West Yorkshire Skills Strategy?
Yeah, thank you. So in terms of the, you're thinking the Future Ready Skills Commission that the leader of Bradford Council is chairing. Yeah, it's very important. It's a very important piece of work because it will, because of the timing, it will feed into that wider work of the Commission. So this is an opportunity in particular, and thinking about devolution and how that might progress. This is an opportunity for us to identify, again, some of our asks as a district, if you like, to feed into that process. And also, importantly, to acknowledge some of the things that we are doing here that perhaps other parts of the city region could learn from as well.
I think that one's really important. We do need to look at overall, given that we might be moving to this West Yorkshire devolution model, we're getting closer to it, and understanding how we can look at our sectors across West Yorkshire and where we perhaps might specialise in things and where other authorities will specialise things, and where we can move people across that geography. Really, I think it's going to be crucial. I'll just ask one more, then I'll bring in colleagues. In terms of like targets and an action plan, how does that fit into this this written report? So we've got things around, for example, the people with a degree level qualification in Kirklees is 33% compared to London 53%. We've got some issues with people with no skills or low skill levels. And would we be looking at setting some targets or specific action plans around that as well?
The short answer is yes. The strategy needs to have a very focused and smart action plan attached to it, and acknowledging that those actions will be delivered by a number of partners, and hence it's important that they all play a role in this piece of work and are bought into it.
Richard.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you for your presentation. It was interesting. So turning to point 218. So this focuses on the construction sector. You did set out some of the ways that you can envisage actually kind of using the construction sector as a focus for developing skills. However, you didn't. We do have a reference to the climate emergency on later on in the paper. 3.4. But actually, the Climate Emergency Working Party that reported in November did actually make a recommendation that an officer-led group that involved involves people from the construction sector, of which we're quite lucky in Kirklees, because we do have some real areas of expertise in sustainable building techniques, actually looks at the possibility of developing some kind of training package or consortia, because if you think about it, we're talking here about the building skills of the future. In fact, they should be the building skills of the present, really. But there's an incredible skills gap in terms of that sustainable building technique. So perhaps you could say something about that. Turning to 2.21. So 2.21, you make the point on one of the bullet points, third bullet point, so that we've got effective use of the council's procurement process to optimise social value through major contracts. So could you give me some specific examples, please, of how that's being utilised and ideas, really, of how that could be rolled forward in the future? Because I really agree it's got to be a crucial that kind of community wealth building approach. It has to be the way forward, I would have thought. So, and finally, I just wanted to ask about, you raised the point about do we have any suggestions in terms of the skills gap? Obviously, maybe I should have declared an interest here, because I am chair of a developing social care cooperative in Macomb Valley. So, and my question does concern social care. So, as you know, with Brexit, and the government has also announced changes to the immigration policies. Okay, so it's commonly agreed that this is going to have a hit on the number of social care workers. Figures vary, but 20% is the usual one bandied about. So really, I guess my question is, this obviously, if we have a collapse in the number of social care workers, this is going to have a tremendously adverse effect on the finances of this council, and indeed, obviously, the services received by thousands of people throughout Kirklees. So clearly, this could be an area where the council could be proactive in developing new new entrants into the workforce. So have you got any thoughts on that? And in particular, thinking about how we could engage with sixth form colleges, who certainly, for example, one of our flagship sixth form colleges, New Colleges, is a leading provider of social care training for at least 350 students, could be more, to study it. So those would be my 3 questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, but briefly, just taking each of those in turn. In terms of the climate emergency and the links between the work that we're doing as a council and around that and this agenda, then couldn't agree more. And I think we will be looking at how do we connect those 2 strands together. How are we ensuring that for example, through some of our housing activity, we're achieving very high standards of we're achieving sort of low carbon housing, and how are we then ensuring that the local skills base, local supply chain and local workers benefit from that activity? That will obviously need training. There is a further opportunity, I suspect, linked to that around modular housing and modern methods of construction, and which will be increasingly part of that agenda moving forward. So absolutely agree with your sentiments there, and we'll make sure that those links are made through this piece of work. In terms of the second point about procurement, then the council is already working on this in a number of ways. We already through our major capital projects require contractors to articulate how they are going to provide local apprenticeships, work placements, visits to schools, other ways of engaging young people. Can we do more? Yes, almost certainly. And that's one of the things that we're looking at, working with colleagues in the procurement team, and part of that is perhaps us being even clearer about what our ask is at the outset. There's a related part of this which is about, so obviously one of the first port of call really for us in this respect is to make sure that the council's own investment projects are unlocking these opportunities, but then it's how do we then work with our private sector partners and also with other partners in the public sector, the NHS, etc., to make sure that these principles are built in. But yes, there are projects that we can certainly point to. The recent commissioning around the sort of spend baths, for example. Those requirements were specifically built into that contract and are being managed on that basis. And then I think finally, again, agree with your point that it's important that health and social care in particular form an important part of this piece of work. One of the things we are working on in the first instance is just ensuring that we have understood the impacts of leaving the European Union under the pressures on the sector. But yes, rest assured, both construction and social care will be sectors that we will have a particularly detailed look at through this piece of work.
Rob, did you want to come back on the climate change point?
Yeah, it was just a point about the bullet point 3 of the, 2.21, which was about council's procurement processes and social value. Just a bit of information. The Sustainable Economy Group, which is the council plus lots of other organisations within Kirklees, are actually just starting some work with the Joseph Rowntree Foundation to look at things like procurement, but also things like HR policies and things like that, to look at the benefits that can arise through those things, but also to share good practice between the council and the anchor organisations. And I think that's really good. It's because we're practically doing some things that we see as being important. So I think that's one to watch over the next couple of years.
Thanks, Rob. We've got quite a few members now. Start off with Martin.
Thanks, Chair. And thanks. One of the points you made at the end, Chris, was that there's a 4 to 6 months time lag before it moves, because that was one of the questions I was asking about, where does it go next, because it'd be useful for reports to know when they're going up and things. I think when it goes forward, could I suggest that we do separate, if you look at the Para 2.18, the construction sector is not infrastructure and transport. That's just part of it. And I think certainly projects like the rail ones that you mentioned, Transpennine Road Upgrade, Northern Powerhouse, I think need to be looked at as a sectoral issue in their own light. It's more than just putting railway lines down and straightening them, because the signalling, the communication, everything that will go along with that have a myriad of skills that we ought to be looking at. Huddersfield University set up a department dealing with some element of rail, and we need to be linking that, looking for maximising the benefit for this authority and its residents. Things like the Network Rail are looking along the trackside for elements of where they can put additional, what they call stabling, sideline, shunting yards and stuff like that, so that if they can't get their rolling stock back to where the main ones are, they have satellite facilities. And one of those could be Hill House at Huddersfield. So the council should be making big strides to talk to the rail sector about, okay, if this is an opportunity for you, then the benefit for us could be looking at something like Flint Street, which we're moving our staff out of. And do they want to set up a centre of excellence induction or something like that, so that we're training people not just in the physical construction aspects, but as I say, in signalling, maybe things like working on board the customer focused elements. We used to be, going back in time, we used to be one of the top areas for the rail industry around here. It was sort of between this area and Crewe. Let's see if we can pull some of that back. The other potential element we've got as a skills gap or opportunity is the hospitality industry. This area must have earned a significant amount of money from last summer wine in the last 40, 50 years. We've got other opportunities. The film and other industry bring people back. Just nearly everything. Last Tango in Halifax, Happy Valley, all of those are using locations around here, and there's an element where we can sell that. And it would be remiss, and colleagues would think I was having a slight turn if I didn't mention that we can also benefit from the excellent sporting activities that we've had, not least of which were the Tour de France, Tour of Yorkshire. That's had worldwide exposure, and people are still coming over to look at that scenery that they saw in 2014. So we need to be selling that. North Yorkshire, Calder Lane and others have actually got those routes signposted so that people can ride them. I think it's a failure that Kirklees didn't follow on with heritage signs and encouraging people. Just one concern which has come out over the last day or so. Obviously we mentioned Kirklees College a lot in here. Sort of Chris is in the hot seat there in the absence of the two cabinet members listed. Is there any worry by the report that the contractor on the Dewsbury Pioneer House has gone bankrupt? Does that affect our future, and how are we going to recover from it? Because I know Kirklees is heavily invested. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, just on that last point, I mean, to be honest, not really in a position to comment in any detail on that last point, Councillor, because it's not really within my service area. But obviously, we'll take that back, and we'll pick that up in discussions with Naz Parker and Carl Battersby and others. I think in terms of your wider points, I think they are well made. We're in discussion with the university about that kind of rail expertise and how we capitalise on that, and that is something something that we'll want to take forward. And your point about the wider range of opportunities in that sector is important, and indeed the wider range of opportunities within the construction sector itself. It's I'm a planning professional by background, and that it's a much broader sector. For my sins, yes, absolutely. So yeah, and also the point about hospitality and leisure and tourism, that again, it affords a number of opportunities for different types of working, and it's one of the sectors that we'll want to pick up and make sure is properly covered.
Yeah, just some information in relation to Network Rail. You may remember that in 2017-18, Kieran Duncan, who's the project manager for the Transpennine upgrade, came along and spoke to this committee. Following on from that, we had a meeting with him to look at the work that we could do with them, to look at developing skills within Kirklees. We actually set up a group which included the university, the colleges, various other people, including the major contractors. Unfortunately, because of the postponement of work beginning, that kind of lost a bit of impetus, really. But I do know that last week, Councillor McBride was involved in further discussions with Network Rail, and the kind of things that you suggest in terms of using certain locations within Kirklees is something where discussions are still underway. So just to assure you that those things are happening. Yeah.
Rob, I've got Ailey, Andrew and Yusra. So Ailey.
Hi, I wanted to ask about a couple of things. I think one was in the paper. It talks about a shortage of digital jobs. I think the software developer and engineer was the top occupation in demand in Leeds City region. But the paper doesn't seem to sort of propose or look at any sort of solutions around digital. And then later today we're looking at the digital update, and it mentions this, but there doesn't seem to be much crossover between the two about digital strategy and learning skills. So I just wondered how are you working with to make sure you're up to date and tackling working with the digital strategy. And then the other point was, I think older people are mentioned in here a bit, but I think the focus is on younger people. And then also with the digital strategy, the digital update later, it talks about digital exclusion. So I thought it'd be nice to hear a little bit about how you plan to integrate older people into the plan. But I also thought I'd make you aware, maybe you are aware of this, that it's a brand new thing. There's a college in London that it's the first free college. So they are offering free level 1 and 2 courses in a whole range of things, childcare, engineering, plumbing, just general construction, digital skills, languages. College of North East London, Connell is called. So I just thought that might be something that you could follow, and perhaps there might be some lessons around that. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Certainly the link with the digital strategy is there. Sort of me and my team are sort of part of the work which Terence and Richard are going to talk about later. So yes, that link is there. There is a particular focus around basic skills on the one hand, which we'll touch on in the later session if that's okay. But also there is an important question around how do we capitalise as a location, because we're kind of pretty much equidistant between Leeds and Manchester, BBC, Channel 4 and Sky. How do we make sure that we're positioning ourselves to attract investment and businesses that might not necessarily want to be based in either of those locations because they want to serve both markets. So that certainly is being picked up in the work. Certainly the point about older people is well made. It is important that the strategy has the right balance between how we're working to support young people and how we are engaging adults, particularly those who maybe are not in the labour market at the moment. We all know that retirement ages are pushing ever upwards, and therefore it's a hugely relevant part of the question. And if you just look at that one sector of construction, the kind of or the sort of some of the shortages around nursing that we've been hearing about today as well, that they will require solutions that involve engaging young people, adults, and people who are maybe sort of nearing their end of their working lives to be able to ensure that we meet those skill shortages. So absolutely rest assured that those issues will be covered in this piece of work. The point about the free college is also well made. There are the system of entitlements for adults is a bit of a minefield in terms of the qualifications that you can that you can receive funding for are very much dependent on age and whether it's your first level 1 or your first level 2. So it's a bit of a minefield, but we'll certainly take that away and look at it.
Andrew and then Yusra.
Thanks. The point at 2.4 about A-level results is very, very welcome. I wonder whether you had any data about the proportions of those able students who chose to either study here or return here, because if we were thinking about sort of wealth creation into the future, the ability of Huddersfield or the locality to retain those people or to have them returned to us is quite an important issue in terms of a growth engine. But I would want to reinforce your point that the real issue is at 2.9, which is about apprenticeships and volume of apprenticeships and quality of apprenticeships. Because we're doing very well at 2.4 in terms of A-levels. It's the other end of the skills spectrum that I think is really important. And I just want to echo my colleague's comment about, she talked about older people. I think I'd broaden it to talk about reskilling. You talk about re-engaging adults. But I think there's a whole issue about people who have been engaged needing to be reskilled as their career or their life progresses. So it's the capacity for them to access it, which I think will be worthwhile a bit more emphasis on. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Andrew. Just very briefly, don't have those statistics around retention immediately to hand, but happy to provide panel with what we do have. There is yes, if there is an opportunity to retain more of those young people who are going into higher education, and some of whom almost certainly do never come back. I think that's but that's then, which is why we're working with the university as an important part of this piece of work, because it certainly extends into the higher education arena. So yeah, thank you.
Yusra?
Hi, thank you for the report there. My question is, I don't know, dare I say this, I think I'm the youngest person in this council. So I'm going to focus on the education side. I think two things, that statistic that you said from the start about 53%, I think it's in London, in terms of degree holders, and 33% here. That is quite a large inequality from the north and south. And we always talk about the north and south divide in many ways. And it seems like education seems to be another part, although I really welcome encouraging people to take up apprenticeships. My question would be, how would we, I think you touched upon it, about ability, whether the student has an interest in going down the vocational route. I just don't want to be in a position where we're pushing people to pick up skill-based sort of qualifications when they have the ability to potentially do a degree. And also, my second question is around employers. How are we working with employers to encourage them to take on people that do choose to do vocational work? Because there are certain vocation qualifications like finance. And if you had a degree holder compared to someone who had a vocation qualification finance, how would the employer be encouraged to keep that system fair? Because I know some employers might potentially go for the degree holder. So how are we going to address that as well in the workplace?
Yeah, thank you. Certainly in terms of your first question, I think ultimately it is about achieving quite a subtle balance. I think we've certainly come from a period where higher education has expanded quite rapidly over the course of the last 20 years. And I suspect at the moment, probably we and as the sort of statistics in the report show, because in terms of academic attainment post 16 we do exceptionally well in Kirklees, then I sense that there probably is in some of our schools and sixth form colleges, probably rightly, there is a focus on working with those young people that are most academically minded and getting them into higher education. I think ultimately it is about achieving a balance, and how we do that is obviously one of the questions for this piece of work. And your other question was almost kind of asking that in reverse in a way, because yes, we are. We already have a number of programs where we're working with employers to, particularly working with people who are currently excluded from the labour market and looking to get them into jobs, and then provide them with support for at least a 6-month period whilst they're in work to be able to hopefully gain enough traction to kind of remain in employment. At that point, it's then about how do we encourage employers to start to invest in the skills of their existing workforce and in those individuals. And so, certainly the other point that comes out of the paper is that there is a wider challenge, and some of this is because of the way that the whole FE and HE system has changed over the years, but there's certainly a wider challenge around ensuring that employers are investing in the skills of their existing workforce, and that will be one of the areas that this piece of work focuses on. There will be a large survey of employers to understand how that's working at the moment, and if and how we could find ways of improving it.
Okay, thank you. Richard, did you want to say anything? You're okay. Well, thank you for that, Chris. I think this has been really helpful. I mean, quite clearly when we're looking at skills, there's a lot of providers, agencies that are involved in this, not just the council. So I think we all have to bear that in mind as well. But you know, there are particular interventions that we can make, particularly around social value and procurement. And it's really useful to hear what's going on, but I think just trying to get more meat on the bone on given that we're going to have such big major infrastructure projects, you know, down the line would be really useful. And given that we have gone into a community wealth building approach, it'd be useful to know how much you know, you're able to work with the team that are leading the community wealth building approach as well. And there was something else I wanted to mention. Oh, we are generally a low wage, low skill economy, so we've still got some work to do. So even though at A level, we have quite an interesting where the A level rates are pretty good, but it seems that we are losing quite a lot of people, because when we're looking at the degree level rates, it's going down again. Now that's a big problem that we've got to all tackle with, and it's not just going to be Kirklees, it's national. We've got to look at what are we doing, how are we, you know, prioritising sectors across this country. So that's something we need to think at a national level as well, in terms of how we lobby that, and the devolution deal that's coming up. But again, I'd say there are things that we can do around our procurement, and particularly around real living wage. You know, that's been a bugbear for me. I think and I know we are signed up to a local living wage here, but I think there are potential things that we could look at more significantly, particularly around social care, as Richard's mentioned as well, given that we are going to maybe be losing some workforce there because of Brexit. So I will just mention that. All right. Thank you so much, Chris. And it's great to see this plan and progression that's happened. All right. Thank you. Right. We're going to move on to green space. If anyone wants to grab a coffee or a tea, please do now, and then we'll move on to green space. Yeah. Okay, we're going to move on to the green space strategy. So if you want to introduce yourselves, and then we'll give you about 5 minutes or so to do the presentation, if that's okay.
All right, thank you very much, Chair. My name's Rob Dolby. I'm the Green Space Operations Manager, and
Catherine Little, Programme Manager, supporting Rob and the team on pulling this together and then delivering.
All right, thank you. It's quite a brief report. Principal reason for that is this is really, my hope was to have a dialogue around this, so it's you help to inform the direction of this, give you some vague ideas around where we're going with it and the intention of it. So principally, the policy or strategy is intended to illustrate how we will work with other people. So we very much view ourselves as an enabling service. We provide spaces, we provide a theatre for people to play out their own plays on, but we don't necessarily write the dialogue of those plays. So we are having a lot of conversations, and we've just engaged with Transformation around that, about how we can get other people to frame their narratives. We've tried to have this conversation in the past. It hasn't always been successful, and I think that part of that is that there hasn't really been the language for that narrative, if that makes sense. People can't frame their questions to us to say what they want us to provide for them. And as an operational service, we will be looking to provide things that are tangible and concrete. So if somebody comes to us and says things like, well, we'd like people to use your parks more because it's a really good thing, that's great, I completely agree with you, but my question as a simple gardener would be, how? What do you want me to do? Do you want me to make the gates a little bit bigger? Do you want me to make the trees a bit taller? What do you actually want me to do? So there is around that. And it also keys into a number of the council sort of overarching strategies. Climate change is an obvious one, but health and well-being, economic vibrancy, all of those type of things. And then in relation to the service itself, this is an umbrella that sits over the top of a lot of operational plans. You can all read. I don't with or working well with third parties, we will not be able to achieve this. An obvious example is the White Rose Forest and the delivery of that. We don't have the land mass to deliver that, so in order to achieve that successfully, we need to be working well with third parties. And I think for that to happen, it's quite important that the council is clear and explicit that it wishes to do that and how it will enable that to happen. So this will feed upwards into those discussions. And I think it's also a useful thing for us to refer to as a service, just to remind us that it is important about that partnership working, and that it is a dialogue. We are not the demagogue who knows everything. Far from it. We are looking for other people to tell us how they want their spaces to work, how they want their spaces to function, and what do we need to do to enable those to be successful spaces. So yeah, that's it really. Thank you.
Thank you. Rob, did you want to say anything at this stage, or are you okay?
I'll come in later, actually, if there are, perhaps in response to some of the questions, yeah.
Richard.
Yeah. Okay, so looking at the section 2, you've got information required to take a decision. Yeah, looking at section 2, information required to take a decision. So in the box, you first of all you kind of differentiate between a strategy and a policy. So obviously, without this becoming an exercise in semantics, I think a policy, obviously policy options are always part of a continuum. And you also kind of ask later, is there a particular approach that you'd recommend to take policy forward? So this is just a thought and a suggestion, because we can measure points on that continuum in many different ways, obviously. But one of them, we could almost have a kind of sliding scale of how transformative, how radical a change might be. And obviously, at the same time, you'd have to identify the risks and problems with that. And I do appreciate that one risk is that can raise unrealistic expectations. But if we are serious about, the points you raised in your presentation and in the paper about working with partners, then the logical next step, once you've identified that range of policy options, is to go and consult with people about them. And it could lead to some quite difficult conversations, but I can think of a few that could well happen, but that's possible. The other thing I wanted to look at was, you asked on your fifth question, fourth question, I apologise. Fourth question, are there any additional projects that you feel we should be investigating to support wider council initiatives and strategies? And, the council is doing a lot about species extinction, for sure. I mean, habitat corridors are mentioned in 3.4. But at the end of the day, we've seen an inexorable destruction of species, so we've clearly got to do more. And really, I would, one of the issues clearly that would need to be looked at is the use of chemicals, pesticides, herbicides, all the well, I mean, especially as given Brexit, that we, there may well start becoming a disconnect between good practice on the continent and what our esteemed government is doing. So this could be something that the council could really take a radical lead on. And, again, there are risks, I mean, I actually worked as a gardener. I appreciate spraying chemicals around is a very easy solution to weed issues, all right. But anyway, okay, so that's a question. And the other, even more radical thing on the continuum, there's obviously a growing debate about rewilding. I mean, this could be something, if we want to connect with our communities, I mean, this could be something that might really connect with young people and really fire their imagination. So, again, that perhaps a project could be considered about that.
Sorry, just on the point that Richard made there about chemicals. I think about a year ago, I think myself, Rob and Richard emailed officers about glyphosate, try and say it the right way around, in terms of weed killing chemicals, and I wasn't quite sure if we were still using it or not. I know one of the London boroughs uses like a hot foam process, which is out of water or something, and I would like us to consider really looking at something like that. I did speak to one of the staff, the green space staff, and he's used to using the chemical, and he goes, look, everyone uses it. I was like, oh, what about this other one? He goes, oh, I pretty don't make my job any harder. So, obviously I don't want to make it more difficult for the guys who actually have to do the work, but I think it is quite an important one, given some of the cases that have come up recently, and with the emergency that we've proposed, that we've taken on.
Okay, thank you for that. I've got some easy and glib answers, and then one that I really am going to struggle to answer, to be honest. So if we look at the continuing species extinction, I completely agree with you. We're looking to map the district. That is hopefully going to pick up a bit of pace. So that is, and we're also entering, with a little bit of luck, a common cause agreement with the Yorkshire Wildlife Trust. So they've got the living landscapes work. So between those two things, we will start to properly ensure that habitat corridors are managed correctly. That we consider species drift as the climate gets warmer. Species are going to move further northwards or further up, just to make sure that there is space for that to happen, and those corridors are maintained. You're doubtless aware of the Environment Act and the impact of that. So the expectation is it'll probably be a 10% net gain on developments. So we're looking at land banks. Rewilding, I have to confess I'm a bit of a fan of rewilding. So we are looking at a piece of work at the moment around Castle Hill on our own land, working again with the Wildlife Trust on that. So looking at a fairly significant piece of interlinked woodland. There's still some comms to do, there's still some work to do around that, but we've got the initial designs for that. So once that has progressed a bit further, that will become more public knowledge than this. We will be employing a number of principles. Rewilding will be one of them. So we will be looking at that idea of principally a thing called accelerated succession. So you don't allow for pure succession, but you actually move somewhere along the serial stage, and then you allow it to progress. And another sort of idea of boxing. So you actually create a woodland belt around an area, which gives the visual amenity, but then inside that space you allow it to naturally rewild. I'll not get boring around jays and thorn and oak, but there is an idea that actually woodlands move constantly. They just don't move on a human timescale. They move on a not quite a geological timescale, but certainly in a woodland, in a wood timescale. So over thousands of years, they move around the landscape, and they move around the landscape through natural processes. And so we need to be considering that as well. So yes, is the short answer to that, and they're absolutely enshrined, and they are moving forward. In order to meet the needs of the White Rose Forest, we need to have about 2,500 hectares in the district at present. We don't have anywhere near that land mass, but we are identifying our land at the moment, so we should be reporting back to the White Rose Forest Board and also to the Council in June or July on the land that will be available from Kirklees. So we're looking at all the land that we own, and then looking at the applicability that will be for tree planting and also for biodiversity. So obviously, dependent upon on the land type, that is what it will be there for. So if it's more appropriate for twite habitat, or it's semi-improved grassland or acid grassland, and that develops more benefit, then we'll be looking at that. And there's also a carbon sequestration metric as well that sits around all the different land types. So you baseline it, you understand what that carbon situation is at present, and then you can project forward what the carbon sequestration will be dependent upon the land use, which is quite interesting. We have got a piece of work around integrated pest management, as it's called, which is around the use of glyphosate. Glyphosate has a very bad rep, and it is a very easy chemical to spray because it is a systemic total herbicide. So there is, to my mind, there is a number of things around that. I would quite happily stop spraying tomorrow. However, as councillors, I suspect that you would be less happy because the volume of complaints would almost certainly go up. So there is a process, and one of the reasons that we're partnering with the Yorkshire Wildlife Trust, with a bit of luck, is that it is to warm people up to the idea that a messy landscape isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it provides a lot more harbourage for insects. Harbourage for insects means there's more chance for birds and everything. So we're quite interested in a rebirding programme as well. And then looking at alternative measures. Again, there is a resource attached to that. One person with a knapsack can cover a large area if you wish to keep it weed-free, and that is your ideal landscape form. And in some areas, that is appropriate. If you've got large areas of paving, town centres, whatever else, you don't want weeds bursting through. That actually causes physical damage. So it's about how do you manage that. You could have someone go and grubbing it out, but someone grubbing it out is a very slow process, as opposed to someone spraying it, which is quite a quick process. We did trial hot foam a couple of years ago, and we'll happily look at it again. When we looked at it initially, you need an awful lot of water, you need quite a big bowser, and it doesn't cover very large areas. So you actually spend a lot of time going backwards and forwards to refill your bowser. And there is a balance around carbon again about travel time and about what you do with that. I think if anybody invents the golden bullet that replaces glyphosate in terms of amenity weed management, then they will retire to presumably an island quite high above the sea, being very comfortable for the rest of their life. There is, I mean, I've been to a number of conferences around this. There's been lots of stuff around APSI around this, looking at an easy replacement. We will continue to look at that. And for me, a big part of this is about a programme to get people to accept that landscapes can necessarily be a little bit messier. And with that comes some challenges, but also an awful lot of benefits. People get upset about dandelions. People get upset about what they regard as common weeds. They have real benefit within the landscape in terms of pollinator species and all those things. So yeah.
I've got Marty first, and I bring Ailey in.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. A couple of things on this. One thing probably which I'd like you considering to this is that the developments, we're talking about green spaces policy, and we ought to be rolling our greenways in with these. It seems ridiculous that in the Kirklees silos, the ownership of greenways doesn't sit with the people who know how to maintain them or anything. The Calder Valley Greenway from Murfield to Huddersfield, the ownership of that is with waste management, because at one time it was a tip. Well, yes, underneath it is the surface and everything now should rest with the people who can deal with it, which is Rob's team, which would be far more efficient, if I may say so, without Rob giving me another long answer. One of the things I think that we should have as a priority, there's a mention in mitigation about natural flood management, but then it leans on trees. The slow the froe process in Calderdale relies heavily on volunteers. And I think we've got a piece of work to do where, in order to protect our communities, we need a slow the froe project which is supported, because there's some work already started in the Colne Valley. I'm not aware of any in the Home Valley, the Dearne Valley or otherwheres, and being absolutely parochial and proud of it. The trouble is, if you don't get something done up those valleys, we suffer in Murfield. So I think there needs to be some resources put into that natural flood management, and I'm glad Rob tied Yorkshire Water in because it wasn't in the text originally. Yorkshire Water are one of the big landowners and have a big piece to play in flood management. The benefit of the greenways as a green spaces corridor ties in with what other things you've talked about, is habitats, tree planting, natural corridors. They become linear parks. And I think that will be one of the things that we're asking for, because we're asked, are there any other projects you feel, are you happy to progress? Well, yes, but let's see some priority on this. That the things which are affecting lives and jobs now, where people are saying they will move their businesses out of the area unless something is done. This is something that can be done without putting concrete and things down, and can give a lasting benefit not only to the valleys but to the uplands, because the natural flood management also then increases the uplands and probably stops them setting on fire in summer.
Right. Thank you for that, Councillor. I will defer to Councillor Walker for natural flood management, because he's actually the chair of the group that I'm a part of in relation to that. But I will certainly take back your comments on greenways to my head of service and for his consideration. Yes.
In relation to the greenways, I actually fully agree with you on that. And I was very frustrated I couldn't come to the meeting last week, because we were actually talking about the White Rose Forest work and a very ambitious £12 million plus project that we're putting together with a range of partners. It will be much better. And the greenways are very important in terms of people being able to access our green spaces. And I do hope that we can do more work to develop these. Around your point about natural flood management, we work very closely with Slow the Flow. So on a number of occasions, I've actually spoken at events with them. We've shared good practice with them. We've learned from them. And a lot of similar work is happening here. A lot of the Slow the Flow work is happening on Yorkshire Water and National Trust land. So the people who are involved in the things there are exactly the same people who are working in the things over here. So, for example, with the uplands, we've constructed over 700 leaky dams over the last few years. At the moment, we're coming towards the end of spending over £500,000, which we got from Wicker with a successful bid, which was led by a Kirklees officer to attract that funding. We've obviously been doing the planting and things like that. So there's a lot happening, and the intention is to do more going forward. There has been some work in the Home Valley, but it's been a little bit more difficult because of the land ownership patterns there. But we are working towards doing more work on that, particularly around things like landowner engagement, so that we can work with the landowners to encourage them to take part in such schemes. We've got 2 mornings coming up on the 21st and 22nd of March in Marsden and in Home Firth, where we are hoping to engage with the wider community to explain the work that's taking place and look at what's happening going forward. So there's a lot happening. Just this morning I met with one of the directors of the National Trust, looking at how we can work more closely with a wider organisation, as well as the Moors for the Future subsidiary organisation of the National Trust. That's a good point. Graham sort of coming at a good time. I think over in the Durham Valley, over in Graham's neck of the woods, we probably should be doing more over there, and perhaps that's one of the things that we need to look at going forward.
You, Ailey.
Hi, I think I've looked at your questions on page 17 about the things you'd like to understand, and I've made a few notes by each, so I'll try and keep it fairly linear. I think on your question number 2 about particular approaches you'd recommend, I think for me there's a thing about improving urban green spaces. I think we've talked about greenways a lot, but I think in terms of things that people might not necessarily consider as a green space, so hedgerows and verges. And I know that recently lots of local authorities have had rewilding success, effectively doing wildflower verges, this kind of thing, and I think it's also just good for flood management, etc. So I thought urban green spaces, and I was complaining earlier about the route in from Leeds Road into the town centre. There's lots of really manky verges around there that could be fixed. Your question number 3 about emerging policies that they should be aware of when developing. I'm quite sure you're aware of it, but it doesn't seem to feature about air quality. So I think previously the committee's looked at air quality reports, and I think tying in green spaces around areas with poor air quality would be a good approach or good thing to be aware of. And then I think on number 5, you've said third-party groups that you should be developing relationships with. There's a couple of groups I'm aware of. One is called Transformers North. I'm probably aware of them. And the other one, Woodscapes as well. Excellent. Okay, you're ahead of me. And then I think also from a central government perspective, I'd say anything that can involve communities more. And I know certainly, I think there's funding from the Home Office and MHCLG around prevent funding, and also around knife crime. And I know there's a bit of a sort of link, stretch between the two, but in general, the objectives are to get people involved in their local communities more. So I think when looking for voluntary groups and funding, I think sort of MHCLG and Home Office funding in these areas might be something to consider.
Thank you for that. Yes, I completely agree with you in terms of pictorial verge and all the rest of it. We would hope to do that. It is just a funding issue at the moment. We have got plans in place for it. It's just we don't have the capital to deliver it. So I completely agree with you. Hedgerows, incredibly valuable resource. We are moving to a more relaxed view on hedgerows, certainly more naturalistic hedgerows. So the broader they are, the bushier they are, the better they are, rather than being neat and linear. So yeah, I completely agree with you on that, and that's something we will do that. Air quality zones, yes, we are working with environmental health. So Martin Wood, the chap who leads on that, we're working with him on that. Things like green walls, about appropriate planting to deal with particulate matter, especially 2.5 from diesels and so on. So yeah, we are working on those things. Kirklees is quite a challenging environment for street trees. We've inherited a Victorian infrastructure that then's had a lot of pipes and things shoved in the ground ever since then. So we don't have a lot of space, and there is a very defined tension, I think, between sort of human traffic on pavements and putting obstructions there. And if you put street trees in there, unfortunately, they grow. And so, obviously, I'm on the greener side of things, but I have to work with my colleagues in highways and so on that. But yeah, I don't disagree with that as well. The community engagement stuff. We used to do some diversionary work, and we still have a strong volunteering element, but that has generally been picked up by the voluntary sector, as in the voluntary sector team. So I think they do a lot around that. We do some work around prevent, but yeah, I think that's a really good point that we could look to push more into that and see if we could offer more diversionary tactics in relation to that. Again, hoping that the relationship with the Yorkshire Wildlife Trust, we've been to see a place called something Wood, I can't remember what it is, down south, and they do an awful lot around excluding. Sorry? No, it did. I'm just dreadful on names. What they do is absolutely amazing. So they obviously accrue an income stream from it, but they are a social enterprise, and they work with excluded children from schools. So a lot of these kids come with complex needs, with complex issues, and rather than trying to cram them into a traditional learning environment, they look at to offer them forest skills, woodland skills, things like wood turning and that kind of thing, which enables them to harness sort of creativity, use a lot of their energy, and at the end of it, they actually come out with some form of recognisable qualification, which they can then use as transferable skills. So that's one of the things that we are considering, and we kind of work across the piece at how we can develop that as well. But yeah, absolutely.
Also in my ward, there's a local group called Conscious Youth who've worked with your team, and they got some Home Office funding to reopen a park. So I think the more that we can look at stuff like that would be really useful, I think. Graham, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Picking on a couple of points, I walked in when you were talking about slowing the flow, and obviously we're part of the problem in some ways in the Durham Valley, the lower Durham Valley. The problem is we don't have a lot of space to do anything. We don't have the moorlands, uplands. It's usually coming through us to go somewhere else. So whilst we have some plans to do something, it's not going to be huge simply because our topography and built-up area is not great. But we are looking at some. I just want to pick up on what you said about wildflowers and hedges in some ways. Myself and my work colleague have started a project this year to plant a load of wildflowers. So we've got 4 sites, and we see this very much as a let's learn from this year and see how we do it. So we've got 4 sites, 4 different sort of areas to see how that works. So we've been working with the Kew Gardens. We're a pilot project for Kew, so we've done some work with Kew Gardens, and we have these 4 big sites, small sites, and little sites to just see how it works. Because wildflower planting in Rewald is still, for us, is fairly early in this process. Lots of other authorities have done this a bit early, so I think we're still learning. So we've got these 4 projects that we're going to do. One thing I will say, and it's like going back to the hedges, some of this is about changing hearts and minds, because we started on Tuesday, I believe. What day is it? Thursday. I think it was Tuesday. We started, in effect, removing grass to plant some wildflowers, and we got a load of abuse on social media because we were digging grass up. And people were saying, well, wildflowers, we won't be able to see when we come out at Junction. The flowers, it's not Jumanji. So there's somehow we've got to change hearts. It's like hedges. After hedge cutting trimming season comes in, if people haven't been down and trimmed the hedges on the side of the road, get loads of complaints, you haven't trimmed the hedges. Hedge trimming day starts today. Do you think we're going to do all the Kirklees in one day? So there's some of this is hearts and minds. People have to understand that there will be a change in how we deal with climate change, how we deal with this change in the weather. And some of that they have to understand. We're planting wildflowers because it's good for the environment. It's better than grass. And it will take probably a year or 2 for it to become established. Get over it in some ways. This is what we're going to do. It's like hedges. Well, as Rob points out, a big bushy hedge is going to support more wildlife, will support the environment better than one that looks neatly trimmed. So as I said, there's a hearts and mind issue here as well, and that's going to be the challenge, I think, going forward. I think once people see it, in reality, there'll be a change, but in that intermediate time, when they get used to it, there will be some challenges around some of these things that we have to do, and they're the right thing to do.
Do you want to come back there, really?
I just wanted to say maybe a small point, perhaps with the big hedges and wildflowers, if you put some of the little bee boxes in and some bird boxes, maybe that would be an instant sort of prompt for people that this is intended.
We spent all this money.
Again, part of the reason for the joined up working with the Wildlife Trust is that we'd look at signage, we'd look at comms, we'd look at education. They do a lot of schools outreach work. They do an awful lot of stuff around this. And the idea is that when we do bring change in, it's brought in a fashion that people welcome rather than people object to. So it really is sitting it inside that comms envelope so that people are aware of what we're doing and the reasons why. So.
Okay. I'm just going to let Yusra, if that's okay, first. So, Yusra.
Thank you for this report. Just on because I rely heavily on your expertise. I'm not an expert in this. In terms of your green space policy, I guess once you've developed that, I'm hoping we can make some commentary on that or look at developing and working together on that. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say this name because it's quite a large company, but I'm sure it's everyone will recognise the colours red and yellow, and they provide fast food. So I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say that this particular group, but they do community groups. So it's a social enterprise, and they work quite widely across Kirklees. And basically, they actually encourage their employees to take part in environmental projects. I know that I've been working with Patrick in Jessop's Park in Batley with this particular community group, and they've been clearing parks. I don't know if I'm allowed to say it. Is it McDonald's? McDonald's? Right, okay. I don't know if people recognise the colours of McDonald's, red and yellow. But yeah, I don't know if you've linked in with them because they're quite keen on their staff in engaging with community projects, especially environmentally friendly ones. Secondly, I'm wondering if you're working, you've mentioned third parties, but whether you're working with other services within the council, because I know K&H, I come across casework all the time where there's pieces of land which are very small but could be developed for wildlife, and I have identified a number of spaces where some community members want to develop it as garden projects, whereas some might want to develop them as wild space. I'm wondering if it's any possibility that you've actually worked alongside other council departments in order to achieve that objective, not just third parties.
The short answer is yes. But so Patrick actually works for me. So yes, I am aware of McDonald's. So he's one of my volunteer coordinators. So yes. So absolutely. We work with them. We work with Cummins. We work with a number of corporate social responsibility type groups. We work with about 120 different volunteer groups across the district. We enable free insurance to groups. We enable a tool store to groups. So that's principally through Natural Kirklees, who we work very closely with. And we have the Great Green Get Together every year, so we enable that to happen. And they've just launched a small grant scheme for groups as well. And again, we are the enabling authority for that. So that's a really good thing. We work right across the piece. So we obviously we are the grounds maintenance people for K&H and for most other council services that have grounds. We are going through a complete redesign process at the moment with K&H. So we've set out some core principles. Biodiversity being actually one of the top ones. Biodiversity and working with people are the two core principles in relation to that. We've identified initially a number of sites that we can hopefully put trees on. If people want to come forward in terms of small garden plots, it does present some challenges because as residents move on or lose interest, then it either reverts back to us to manage and maintain, or it falls by the wayside. But no, we absolutely welcome that. But obviously, it's K&H who would deal with that, not us, in terms of the management of some of those relationships, because we are the subcontractor for K&H on their ground. The other principal landowner is the corporate landlord, and we work very closely with them as well. So yeah, part of this review is looking at all of council land. So every department, everything that's vested with Kirklees, potentially out as grazing licenses and so on, and what is the most appropriate use for it. So yeah, but we would also very much encourage, if people want to do relatively small scale activity, we would support them through the volunteer coordinators, and then we would also support them through point them towards Natural Kirklees. As I say, there are all these volunteer groups. They can either come along and work on existing sites, or if they wish to start their own projects up, we can support them through that as well. Or even parachute people in if there are the sort of small scale things that they want to do, we can support with that. Anything we can do really. And we would also look at small bits of unowned land. Everybody owns it, but it may not be registered, and we could potentially do things like that. So in terms of pocket parks, city centre work, all that kind of thing, in creation of small pockets of wildlife preserve and so on, they all form stepping stones that enable things to move around the place. So yeah, absolutely.
I just want to mention, I think Manchester are quite ahead. They have started projects like that. So you're shaking your head, so I assume you already know. Thanks.
Their website is superb as well. They've got a really good thing.
Yeah, fantastic. So we've got Richard and Martin, and then we've got to bring the digital plan in, if that's okay. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Chair. I just want to bring in obviously green spaces are fantastic and everything like that. But the one issue that sort of affects everyone, that's litter. And so I was just wondering, under the point of connecting with third-party groups, if there's any sort of connection with Keep Britain Tidy, because locally we've organised a litter pick in a couple of weeks' time, and I was quite staggered to find out that the council didn't promote this Keep Britain Tidy Spring Clean, and one council officer said it was a no-brainer to get involved, yet the council don't seem to have registered for part of that. I may be, if I'm wrong, I'll apologise, but it seems that there isn't, from a council point of view, it's not registered for the Keep Britain Tidy. And obviously, it mentions in the summary that there's a crossover with green space and a lot of different parts of the council. So maybe we can get together and coordinate. When the Keep Britain Tidy, Great British Spring Clean is a month-long promotion that we could get the information out there and actively promote volunteer groups, because we're heavily reliant on volunteer groups to go out and do that litter picking. And it just seems to be, obviously there's environmental benefits from that as well. You know, we don't want to see the hedgehogs getting in milk bottles and all that sort of thing. So yeah, it'd be good to include some sort of policy for engagement with Keep It and Tidy. Thank you.
I know that the volunteer coordinators, they've got a number of events going on for the KBT Spring Clean, so we are doing that. We're supplying litter pickers. We're supporting Environmental Kirklees, which is Jeff and Chaz Bull, working in Huddersfield City Centre, so we're supporting them with that. You're probably right. We need to look at the comms and actually say what we are doing. But certainly from my service area, we are working closely with them to promote this. So or to support them with this.
Martin?
Yeah, thanks. Just picking up on a point that Rob made a short while ago. You mentioned green walls, Rob. Could I make a plea that senior staff, cabinet members, move those from being landscaping to being seen as air quality and transport issues? We had a outline planning application come up in Murfield, which was for access only for a retail park, and we requested that a moss wall or green wall be put in as part of the condition when they were dealing with the access. And planning came back and said, that'll be looked at for landscaping. Well, as we've just been talking about, moss walls are not landscaping, they're for air quality. They're not there just to look pretty, they're actually there to perform a function. You know, the one up Saltrable Hill wasn't there to make a concrete wall look pretty, it was there to absorb. And I think from a council perspective, we shouldn't be leaving that until the landscaping phase. When people are talking about putting roads in and things, these measures should be put in there to mitigate the effect of the traffic. And Richard, just picking up on what you're saying about keeping places tidy, there was a great campaign called Love Where You Live, and Murfield in Bloom adopted this last year as their slogan and engaged with many community groups to improve the area to such an extent that Murfield is now the Yorkshire representative for Britain in Bloom this year. So I'm sure if any community groups want to know about engaging and how to really motivate people, then Ruth Edwards and the people like that from Murfield in Bloom happily share their experience and hopefully will be successful.
And just to note, we did support Murfield in Bloom. So let's not forget, the council were part of that. I will take that back to my colleagues. It's obviously outside my bailiwick, but I will take that back on the green walls.
Well, thank you, Rob. I just want to reiterate the point about the moss wall and the green walls. You know, there's some great functions of those, and I saw an example in Mexico City, where I know it's totally different, but but they'd put it on one of their, like, you know, very well used motorways, and they'd basically, well, that's it, right? And the walls that they just made these green walls, and it was basically just sucking up a lot of the emissions and stuff. And I would like us to assess the options around that, really. I think that's really important. And then just on the greenways, again, you know, in areas like mine in Ashbrow, it's a great route that we can use. The canal is a great route that we can use. It's away from the main roads, particularly for people who are walking or cycling, but they don't always feel safe, you know, and I know that's an issue around budgeting as well, but safety and cleanliness really, have got to be key ones around that, really, don't they? So I'll say that to everybody. So, all right, thank you, everybody. That was really helpful. Thanks for presenting the plan. Really appreciate that. Thank you. We'll just ask digital colleagues to come down, and then if anyone wants tea or coffee, grab your coffee, and then we've got this one. Okay, we're going to move on to the digital strategy and the rollout of the broadband work that's going on in Kirklees. So if you want to start, Richard, and then we'll move to questions. Actually, everyone might want to introduce themselves.
Okay, so let's do that instead.
Yes, yeah.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Richard Hollinson. I'm the Head of Major Projects at Kirklees Council. And the Council's role in digital infrastructure provision sits in my service.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Terence Hudson, and I'm Head of IT in the Council. I'm also the person who's leading on the development of the technology strategy.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Paul Crane. I'm Head of Engagement and Rollout at Fibre Nation. We're building the full fibre network at the moment in Dewsbury, Batley, Hetton, Wycombe and surrounding areas. Eventually we'll be covering about 70,000 properties there.
Hello, I'm Carl Tinson. I'm Project Manager for Major Projects on Digital Infrastructure.
Good afternoon. My name's Steve Moore. I'm the City Manager for City Fibre, currently investing in Huddersfield and expanding to North Kirklees.
So thank you everyone for your time this afternoon. It's probably obvious from the way we've introduced ourselves and worth noting from the outset that digital infrastructure and services in Kirklees are primarily delivered by the private sector and not the council. But we do have an absolutely key enabling role and a strategic role in aiming to get the best out of digital infrastructure provision for our residents and businesses. Digital's obviously a cross-cutting theme, and so despite the relatively small digital infrastructure team that's sat in my service, we're operating across a number of service areas across the council. So those include IT services, major project service, legal services, highways, business and skills, and the assets team. So we're operating across a number of service areas because of the sort of way in which we have to enable, and we are trying to enable, the process of delivery. And we'll go a bit more into that in the report itself. Scrutiny have obviously asked us to provide an update, and the last time officers were at the Economy and Neighbourhoods Scrutiny panel was on the 14th of February 2019. So it's just over a year since. And the report at that time that members of the committee and the panel, will be aware, covered things at the outset, I guess, of what was coming in terms of digital infrastructure provision in Kirklees. So it set out issues to do with what the various local, regional, national strategies were and are at the time, the sort of state of the digital economy in a general sense, and where Kirklees was at the beginning, very beginning really, of that journey. One of the main recommendations that was given to officers was to make progress on what was called a digital plan at the time. We'll talk a bit about that this afternoon. We've now brought forward something called a technology strategy and the work that we're doing around an evolving digital plan and programme. Okay, so onto the report itself. I think it's fair to say that it's really been year one of significant lift-off. In 2019, City Fibre and Fibre Nation both announced major infrastructure delivery plans, and we've concentrated our efforts on our regulatory role of aiming to enable that provision as efficiently, as speedily as possible. It's an increasingly deregulated market. My colleagues from the private sector may have their views about that. So our role as a local authority is very much around, as I described in the introduction, to enable the provision, to work within what's called telecommunications code, and to help facilitate the best outcomes for residents and businesses. So if I just take you to section 2 of our update report, one of the key actions that we've made is to establish some governance within the council to coordinate our resources across the different services, and to manage some of the risks and issues that arise from the delivery programme. So we've established a digital partnership board. The terms of reference are listed in the report. We've also created what we call a digital infrastructure operational group, and that's where our colleagues, together with our private sector colleagues, are coming together to manage and risk operational matters and risks and issues that are occurring on a weekly or monthly basis. So that can be legal issues to do with way leaves, going into different properties, what's going on with the highways, highway network management, managing some of the risks and issues and disruption issues that occur with the rollout of provision of the infrastructure. That process is very much helping us manage risks and issues as they arise. Obviously, it's a challenge for all parties, but we are managing those risks as best we can. We are trying our best to manage some of the risks that occur to the highway network, and we have a process now for escalating risks so that we can try and minimise disruption to residents and businesses, but also provide them with some of the excellent new infrastructure that's coming their way. We've also established a digital inclusion task and finish group, and that's very much around our Kirklees economic strategy and some of the employment and skills opportunities that can come with this programme. We've got an aspiration for 100% of Kirklees residents to have the minimum basic digital skills, and establishing a coordinated approach to tackling digital exclusion issues. In terms of governance, that's probably where I'll just pause, because there's obviously other things in the report. But those board arrangements allow our strategic directors and service directors to then obviously control risks and allow us to liaise with members, portfolio holders and cabinet and council if necessary around resources and risks and issues arising. Okay. Part 3 of the report is about our technology strategy. So I'm just going to hand over to Terence about what we're doing there and how we're bringing that forward. And that should provide a bit more context about our role in terms of getting the best out of this for businesses and residents in Kirklees.
Thanks, Richard. Good afternoon, everybody. We've in the IT department, we've certainly been working on this technology strategy now for around about 8 or 9 months. And for us, it's a bit of a departure from where potentially in the past IT services have always been quite internally focused and only worried about putting things online rather than actually looking at the bigger picture. So for us, this is quite a big shift in terms of thinking about Kirklees as a place, how we deliver services in the borough, but also how we influence how technology is utilised in the borough. And it is about linking up all of the work that goes on in all of these different locations, whether it's in the economy and infrastructure team, whether it's working with companies like City Fibre and Fibre Nation, because both of them supply parts of our network, but also about how do we then embrace new technology and new standards. So it's about how we deliver a different level of service, because in 5 years' time, the world that we live in will be completely different. It's already quite different today, and you can see that in the high streets, and you can see that in the development around Huddersfield Town Centre and Dewsbury Town Centre. And it's about how do we underpin all of that to deliver something very significantly different for residents and business and partners across Kirklees. So what we've got there very briefly is we've articulated 1 vision and 7 ambitions, and there's a lot more behind that, and we can talk about that later. But fundamentally, that starts with just getting the basics right, doing the day job very simply, but all the way through to how do you make best use of technology wherever it touches people and their lives across Kirklees.
Thanks, Rose. So in our quick canter through, we've got section 4 of the report, which is a bit of narrative around digital infrastructure itself and what the government's ambitions are around digital infrastructure. You can see from the dates of the announcements that this is an ongoing, evolving thing, but there's a lot of ambition around this from the government. So it's May 2018, the government pledged for 15 million fibre to the premises connections by 2025, which is coverage of 60% of the UK, and full coverage by 2033. And as recently as January this year, the Right Honourable Baroness Nicky Morgan gave a speech aiming for nationwide deployment of full fibre and gigabit capable broadband, and that is what these companies are delivering in Kirklees. I've touched on some of the legalities. It's quite complex in terms of the negotiation of way leaves for access to land. These are private sector utility companies who are going in to bring in, essential new infrastructure. But to do that, they need to cross private land and make connections to properties, some of which are in the council's ownership and some of which are in private ownership. So you can imagine some of the legalities involved of land ownership. The council's team are committed to barrier busting some of these issues to enable the rollout of the programme as fast as possible. And we're currently engaging with a number of suppliers in the district, including City Fibre and Fibre Nation, but also primarily Openreach and Virgin Media as well. That probably takes me to section 4.1, which is around where we are, I suppose, which is a bit of the interesting bit in terms of where we are with this programme from a Kirklees perspective, bringing it back to us in the UK. And I mean, it's really, really good news for Kirklees. We have been essentially chosen by these companies to deploy their infrastructure ahead of many other parts of the UK. And that's excellent news for residents and businesses in the district. City Fibre have a £30 million commercial fibre to the home investment across 9 ward areas: Newsham, Combe Valley, Lindley, Ashbrow, Ormonbury, Golca, Dalton, Crossamore, Netherton and Greenhead. That's around 60,000 premises are being connected up for this. And the current build programme spans between 2019 and 2021. Currently got 5,000 homes that are full to the fibre capable, with 8,000 to follow shortly. So the number of connections are really significant. And that means, obviously, there's a very large number of people and residents in Kirklees who are going to get the ability to access 5G services ahead of many other parts of the country. And I'll come on to why we think our programme over the next 12 months needs to exploit that as much as possible for residents and businesses. Fibre Nation's been working in Kirklees since July 2019. The full fibre infrastructure will give internet suppliers access to gigabit-capable network to provide customers in Dewsbury, Batley and Heckman-Dwike. And your first properties went live in February 2020. And it's anticipated that build programme will be completed by 2022. Openreach are operating in Fopton and Kirkburton. They've announced areas that will be targeted by what they call their full fibre build programme. These are areas that are selected as part of their Rural Britain scheme. I think it's probably fair to say that City Fibre and Fibre Nation, you can tell from the geography of what I've talked about, are the main urban areas of the district. And so Openreach and some other programmes, including a programme called Superfast West Yorkshire and other programmes, are aiming to focus on the rural areas, the harder to reach areas for infrastructure provision, but there are plans and programmes in place for those areas. And Virgin Media are planning schemes for Chickenley and Birstall over the next couple of years as well. Okay, I need to allow you time for questions, so I'm going to, if it's okay with your permission, Chair, I'll move on to a little bit about our digital work programme over the next 12 months, and then maybe open it up for questions, if that's okay. So at the moment we've established a relatively small team within the Major Project Service. The service is largely about infrastructure provision. We do deal with transportation, major transportation schemes, energy schemes and other bits of infrastructure. We're working closely alongside our blueprint and town centre regeneration teams and our business and skills service. So I think we've got a real opportunity with a very small team to get the advantages for digital integrated in some of the council's projects and programmes. So that's one of the main emphases that the challenge that we've handed to the team to try and achieve. Also, though, we've got a really good opportunity now with the technology coming our way and the launch of the technology strategy for the council to look at how we deliver services across different service areas in the council. And so we've started a series of engagement sessions across the council to explore how we can do that, and that might be how we deliver services around extra care, children's services, but also physical infrastructure plans and programmes as well. We're working with an organisation called Renetso, who've got significant experience of evaluating public sector digital strategies and expertise in embedding that in the way the council works to exploit the advantages of this. The digital project work in 5.2, I've already touched on some of those things. That's mainly about the physical infrastructure and some of the capital work programmes the council are doing, how we can integrate the advantages of new digital technology into those. 5.3 is a programme that we're running around demand stimulation. And this is primarily about digital enterprise voucher schemes and events. This is something Chris's team in the Business and Skills Service are running alongside us, trying to identify areas and businesses that will benefit most from being able to get a better digital connection on the back of the technology. And then finally, another work stream around digital skills as a catalyst for driving productivity as a key part of our digital inclusion programme. I'll stop there. Is that okay? Obviously happy to provide any more detail or take any questions.
Thank you for that. That's really useful. I'm sure colleagues want to come in. I'm just going to ask a couple of quick questions if that's okay. I'd like to ask both our providers here, City Fibre and Fibre Nation. Have I got that right? Yes. Brilliant. I thought I might end up mixing you up. So Richard mentioned that you could have gone to a number of places, and actually you've decided on Huddersfield, Dewsbury, Batley. So can I ask why have you picked our towns to do your work?
It's a very good question. So City Fibre has a long relationship with the council, and you've helped support us over a long journey. In fact, it was one of the first 3 investments in the UK, York, Peterborough, as well as Kirklees. And that gave us a network here that allowed us to be able to come back and then expand. So I guess in answer to the question, there's 2 parts. One, because of the support of the team within the council, which can't be sort of over-egged really. To make it as easy as possible to deploy and invest is really important for us.
Yep, hi. Probably similar to Steve in some ways, but different to Steve in others, because Fibre Nation, it was a new relationship for us in Kirklees. I'd obviously been talking to Kirklees Council for a while, since Steve was there actually. So our criteria was probably slightly differently, because City Fibre had some existing infrastructure here already before they decided to roll out FTTP. We had no infrastructure at all. So our decision criteria, amongst other things, rely on things like geography, density of properties, But also as we exited York, the programme in York, and we were looking for somewhere else to go, we were still fairly constrained in terms of finances and in terms of geography. So we had teams locally here in Yorkshire, so we were looking for somewhere else in Yorkshire that had the right density and was the right size and so on. But also one thing we're doing very differently here is utilising third-party assets, in other words, poles and ducts by other providers to minimise the disruption that in providing the network here in Dewsbury. So yeah, that's the criteria we used really.
I don't actually know if you can answer this question, so don't worry if you can't right now, but we've been talking previously about social value work that Kirklees Council tries to do with their partners, and particularly on big major infrastructure projects. Did you have any discussions with the council around social value procurement? So was there any discussions about we would like people within our area to benefit through jobs or apprenticeships? And if so, were there any targets set around that? I don't know if you can mention that now.
I think it's a really good question. I think we've had, so as a supply chain, we take a lot of stuff locally where possible. So obviously we're aware of climate emergencies and climate change, so bulk haulage, backfilling trenches, that sort of thing. We employ a local contractor. It's Brighouse based, but it's we're comparatively local. And then, yeah. But I think that's the point about skills, and I could wax lyrical about the need for construction sector skills to meet the demands of those lots of projects that are going on. So we are happy and we are engaging to be part of that project as far as skills. And we're also delivering community projects for improving skills and digital skills within the build area.
Yeah, very similar really. With the industry nationally, we know that over the next 10 years is going to be very hard pushed to meet the demands of the industry in terms of resources. So we, like other partners, are really keen to use local resources where possible. We're doing a little bit of work with Dewsbury College at the moment, I think starting September, just around the possibility of apprenticeships and really just educating people of the possibilities within the industry for people that don't necessarily want to go on to university, and really showing them what skills and job roles there are available in the industry. So yeah.
Sorry, just to add, I mean, I did skip over parts of the report, but under 5.4 we've got a digital inclusion group established, and through the Business and Skills Service, as part of a wider piece, we're looking at how we can work with the supply chain to get some of these social value outcomes. And you probably heard from Chris earlier. And we've been working with various organisations, including an organisation called Enable. You may have mentioned that earlier. They're particularly interested in helping us bring forward apprenticeship schemes in the construction sector. We're also looking at ways in which we can work with organisations like Enable to create extra capacity within the construction sector, so that very short-term contracts are avoided because they can work with Enable over a longer period of time. And that means that peaks and troughs of capacity issues we can assist with as part of our enabling role and get a social value outcome at the same time.
Andrew?
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. Very interesting report. I understand you're in the major projects group, and that tends to be helping people dig holes and build things. But as far as Kirklees is concerned, we're not really interested in the fibre being laid in the road. I don't think we are. We're interested in exploiting the fibre that's been laid in the road. And so, although you mention it in 5.3 and 5.4, I think a much larger part of what you're doing needs to be focusing on how do we get to a place where we're both protecting our community from being exploited by other people who are using this fibre, and more of the value that can be exploited is being left here. Because, I mean, the real worry about this must be, and your statistic was, it's 7 seconds to download a film. That's great. I wish it was 7 seconds to upload a film, and we were creating the films to be uploaded, i.e. that we had the skills and the businesses that were going to use this fibre, rather than the value being exported to Silicon Valley or somewhere else. And that's, I think, the challenge for us. The fibre in the road is of no value at all to this community unless we exploit it to economic benefit in our streets and our houses and our businesses. And it's not strong enough on that. It's great on the relationship with these guys, and it's good that there's got a good relationship because they've got to do it, otherwise we haven't got it. But once we've got it, we've got to exploit it. And it doesn't feel it's, well, exploit it and be safe in exploiting it, because I think those are the other side of it. Because the bad things that come on this stuff are gambling, porn and fraud. And it's how do you protect people and how do they use it to make money? And that doesn't come out of here quite strong enough for me.
Sorry, Chair.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, very good points and questions. And I think we would agree to a certain extent. We are at the beginning of this work programme, really. The infrastructure's coming. Obviously, we explained that we've got an emerging technology strategy that looks exactly at achieving some of those objectives. But I think our work over the next few months will explore how we're going to do that, both exploit the advantages and safeguard our residents and businesses at the same time. And there are lots of examples already of where some of those outcomes have been achieved. But we are not yet at a point with our programme where we can come back to you and say, we've achieved the objectives in certain areas and we've put safeguards in other areas. And I think that's a fair challenge. And, we come back in a year and we will have made progress on that as part of our digital work programme. We've talked in our report under 5.2 about a number of areas where we're looking to exploit some of the benefits of the digital infrastructure rollout. But they are examples, and that's a fair point. I think we can come back with more on this. Yeah, Terry, yeah, please.
For me, I think this is where the technology strategy comes in. So we're trying to articulate quite a number of your points that you made there in our strategy. So it is about, it's great if the fibre's in the ground, that's one part of the capability. Then the residents, businesses and so on need the ability to exploit it. Within the strategy we talk about security as well. So it isn't just about keeping our own network secure, it's how do we support people in Kirklees to keep themselves secure as well. And it also touching on, it was mentioned earlier from Chris, around digital skills. So as one of the 5 key digital skills that you should have as a citizen, one of those is about being safe online. So that is quite an important story that we're trying to work through here. So we are talking to, as for example, to the university, because their School of Engineering and Computing, I think, creates around 50% of all of the secondary revenue that goes into research into the university, and it's about how we can tap into that. So we actually have university postgrads on site in our computer centre, actually working alongside us on security, and we want to actually really build that relationship. We're also talking to Kirklees College as well around how they can play a role in that kind of investment locally. And it's interesting that you're seeing Kirklees College setting up the base in Dewsbury as well. So that's a key thing, and it's all about linking all of this up around the network rail investment and so on. So we are actually putting lots of different things in play, and hopefully what we'll be able to then say, really get across to you, is how that all links up to a much bigger picture over the coming months. So hopefully by this time next year, Richard comments, we'll be in a significantly better place and much more well-informed place. But there's a lot going on. And the only last bit I'll mention is we are working with conscious youth as well, hopefully, to deliver something within Ashbrow area and with groups of young people in that area, and then looking at how then we cascade some of that wider, because we've already done a little pilot scheme in Birstall, so it's all good stuff at the moment.
Okay, Yusra.
Hi, thanks for the report. I guess my questions is going to be really simple. Every other town has been mentioned. I'm actually a Batley councillor, and I'm just a bit concerned that it's not been mentioned. But given the way that technology is developing so fast, we're more likely to have a young person's more likely to have a phone than a vehicle. And I don't want any town to be left behind, because that is going to impact on an individual's future as well. I guess that's my first point, so I hope that no town's going to be left behind. My second point, on your report, you said that obviously technology is great, that we cannot currently predict with any great certainty what new technologies are going to be available. And even if you put the infrastructure in place, that people might not be able to utilise that to full capacity, including children. How can we streamline that? How can we, if we're going to put these infrastructure in place, and if you're going to invest in these places, how can we work together to make sure these infrastructures and this technology is used to full capacity? Because at the end of the day, I want to be like a town. I want to be, as Huddersfield, Dewsbury, Batley, Hetman Wyke, etc. We want to be the area where people actually come into, because there's great technology. And I just wanted to bring your attention to that, really, as well.
So I'll deal with the Batley point. We have put in our report, City Fibre announced further investment in Dewsbury and Batley. On the technology prediction, well, I think, we put it in as a fact, I think it is. But I think our team want to explore in a place-based way, in line with the Council's corporate plan, ways in which we can maximise those benefits with residents and businesses. So we're looking into our own ideas, which will fall out of the programme. And as part of the place standard and other ways of working, we will need, I believe, we will need to ask local residents and businesses about how we can get the most out of it as well. Because the technology strategy sets us off on that with a framework of objectives. But we need to understand what the different parts of Kirklees want out of this, and the different character and geography of the different places. Some things were pretty universal, I guess. Certain bigger businesses will want the fastest connection, and that's it. And they might be prepared to pay separately for that service. And then if we ask local residents, they'll have a very different answer to that. We should also remember that the 5G services themselves might be provided by other people, Vodafone and other people as well. So we will need to open up conversations with those organisations to understand what they're doing and where, and how we can get the best out of those processes. So I suspect in a year's time we'll be able to tell you a lot more about where 5G services have been provided by whom, Kirklees.
Can I just follow up on that one? And I'm going to answer a question that was posed earlier around, so why did City Fibre come to Kirklees in the first place? And I will tell you a story that started in 1997. So it's 23 years ago we made capital investments inside Kirklees that made us attractive to a company like City Fibre, because we actually sublet some of those ducts that we put into the ground. So this building itself is connected to our own private dark fibre network, and that's part of the reason why a company like City Fibre came here. And for me, it's what is our role inside the borough. So as a for example, EE have announced that they're rolling out 5G, and we've been a customer of EE's in all its various incarnations for many years. And it's what's our role in that? What's our role in ensuring that coverage is across the whole of Kirklees? And then as a consequence of that, hopefully more great things will happen, because we will be invested in different places.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I was interested to note on the cover sheet that it said that all electoral wards are affected. Whilst Yusra has mentioned on page 24 as Batley, if you go through the report, Dewsbury, Batley, Heckmondwike, Flockton, Kirkburton and Dalton are all mentioned as benefiting. To me then, looking at this, it seems like the North Kirklees orbital is a digital bypass because it goes round Murfield and we're not getting any benefits according to this. I'm getting residents ringing me up about the slow connection speeds, and I've been in touch with BT Openreach and others, and there's nothing planned for the future. Yeah, in Murfield, we have businesses large and small, including the European manufacturing base of a major international pharmaceutical company. If they can't get digitally connected to other people around the world that they link with for teleconferencing and other things, they may well move these businesses out of Kirklees in total. So, yeah, it just seems strange when every other community around Murfield is getting an upgrade, but Murfield isn't, you know. I'd like an explanation. Give that one a go.
Well, I'll just come back with that one. I think so City Fibre's got two waves of investment in Kirklees. The first is Huddersfield, the second is what we call Dewsbury Batley, but it goes way beyond that. What I would say is that for commercial reasons, we wouldn't want to cover that in a public forum, but I'm happy to have a conversation with yourself or other interested parties to discuss how that might work for your respective wards.
Okay, so obviously we can only put in a public report where bearing in mind what I said at the beginning of this, that the infrastructure is provided by the private sector. However, there are various initiatives around that are available to us, and we'll have to work with partners to do it, because unless we're going to put the miles of infrastructure in ourselves as a local authority, then we'll have to work with partners to achieve it. The government's announcing plans around a major funding programme around this. We don't know all the details yet. It's certainly something around what they call the final 10 or 20%. So obviously there's recognition by the government that they want everybody to be digitally connected, whether you're in Murfield or any other part of Kirklees. And some areas are going to need an extra bit of help to get to that point. So we await some of the announcements. We await to see how we're going to be able to best play into that. There's definitely on the to-do list. And we'll have to see whether that fund's open to local authorities or the providers themselves or MPs or whoever's allowed to go in on those schemes. The open reach stuff's quite interesting. I mean, the West Yorkshire Combined Authority have their own digital governance. They're very aware of this issue, obviously not just in Kirklees, but across the whole of West Yorkshire. And there's the Open Reach programme focused on sort of hard to reach areas for a few years and made excellent progress. They've sort of reached the point where on the even harder to reach bits now, and obviously it costs more and therefore they probably need more support from government funding programmes. So we wait to see on that. Our strategy is for all wards, hence the technology strategy for all the Kirklees district. And we won't forget about the last 10 or 20%. I think that's the point where the council and other public sector organisations probably do need to try and intervene and have a role.
And it goes back to my point earlier around how we invest. So we've connected 130 schools up over the last few years. We've added, certainly in the last 12 months, we've had 30 additional schools. Largely they're all in rural areas. And as a consequence of us doing that, so we ask for a fibre connection. You know, we don't put anything else into our schools. If other companies want to do that, that's their choice. But our mantra is it's fibre and it's fibre only. And once we've done that, then that attracts interest. So if you look at something like the build out from Kirkburton, you can actually pinpoint all the different locations where we've got fibre circuits in. So we can help prime the market, but we can't significantly adversely affect it. So, you know, it is something that we do all the time, and we're certainly going to make a push over the next 12 to 24 months to try and persuade every single school in Kirklees to get a fibre connection, and we're working with BD UK on that as well.
Thank you. Graham, did you want to come in on a particular point, and then I'll do Richard?
Just pick up a couple of things. As Richard and Terence have alluded to, I think we'll be a lot further down the line in about 12 months on this. I mean, when we sat down to try and do this, I can't tell you how difficult this is really, because nobody knows in 2 years' time, nobody knows in 5 years' time. So some of this is well educated, believe you me, but some of this is a little bit of guesswork, because I don't know whether the jobs are going to be in 5 years. I don't know what technology we can use. We've had interesting conversation about how much technology we know probably won't be used, but what is going to replace it? So we do need about 12 months to see where it's going, and by that time we'll have more of an idea on 5G, because I think 5G is going to be a real changer for everybody, and will change lots of things in people's lives that they don't know yet as it gets rolled out. So 5G is really important. It's important that we invest in and get our partners to invest in 5G. Going back to what Martin said about the fibre in the ground, I'm going to challenge you, Martin, here. This should be a national infrastructure project. This should never have been left to local authorities trying to do the bit with private parties. This should be as important as building HS2. We should have a digital infrastructure network provided, funded by the government. You're in power. Go back to your MPs, go back to your government, tell them this is what this country needs, a proper infrastructure investment, and then Murfield won't get bypassed, and neither will Denbydale.
For now, we'll move on to Richard. Okay.
I'm being challenged, Chairman. So if I can come back, I'll happily take it up with the MP, and you know, we can fill the gaps that were left after years of Labour government when we can pick up on it. And if Kirklees isn't willing to pick up the mantra of having devolution, then I'm sure the people in Kirklees in May will respond to that and put somebody in who can.
Thank you, Martin. Richard.
Okay, thanks, Chair. Yeah, I'd just like to say that welcome the advances that we're making. Obviously, technology changes day by day, and you're soon left behind if you don't keep up. My only point is, with the ongoing projects to get it all installed, what controls are in place with the subcontractors who are doing the digging and the laying and everything else? And obviously, when they dug the channel, laid the cable and put it all back, what checks are in progress to make sure that it's back neat and tidy and that sort of thing? Because I know one person opinion will differ from the next door neighbour, but if you could, cheers.
It's a good question. Okay, so if in section 6.4 of the report, we have there's only a paragraph on this. It doesn't really explain the fully answer to your question, but the way this works is that digital providers, such as the colleagues here, are basically utility companies like gas, water, and all the others, and so they have a statutory right to carry out work in the public highway in order to do this. But those works are regulated by the Act that we've put in here. It's called the New Roads and Street Works Act 1991. And so for planned works, our colleagues here are required to give us advance notice so we can try and coordinate the works, primarily around avoiding disruption. But it also does allow us a say, to an extent, about the quality of what's put back and how we do it. By setting up the digital operations group, and in fairness to our suppliers, they didn't have to come, but we are trying to establish a collaboration here. It allows us to talk through those issues. I mean, you won't believe some of the conversations we've talked about, the sort of working around trees much more carefully, and the kind of material we put back after we've taken things out. So there are some checks and controls in place, but the teams who are doing it on the ground are working for the suppliers. So that's how the process works.
So can I just ask, so if somebody wishes to raise a concern, do they go to the council or do they go direct to...
So usually you'll see with roadworks, and there is a lot going on, isn't there? There's going to be a lot of disruption in the district. We're rolling out a lot of other new infrastructure as well over the next few years. There are signs on there that say whether it's Yorkshire Water doing the work or Network, the gas company or whatever. So City Fibre and Fibre Nation have display information and there's usually a contact number for them to contact. And so it is the suppliers, not the council. We do have a team, the Highway Network team, management team at the council who are getting queries. We are doing our best to manage those. So if residents do come to the council, we're obviously doing our best in terms of customer care there and helping them find the right place and the right people to speak to.
Yeah, so I mean, just to give you the scale of it, at the moment, full fibre coverage in the UK is only 10%, and we need to get to 100. We're funded to get to 8 million home connections, so that's 30% of the UK. So we're digging up a lot of streets and connecting lots of homes and businesses. It's the UK's largest civil engineering project in its history, happening over the next few short years. We always say respectfully, it would be great if everybody could just leave for a little while and then come back when we've finished, but that's not practical. We work closely with the council. We get it right a lot. We get it wrong as well. It's difficult. Some of the streets are very narrow and there's lots of cars and people are at home and coming and going. So it is challenging. And I think one of the pieces about working with the council and the community is asking for patience and a bit of forgiveness sometimes as well. We are pretty good at, and the contractors are pretty good at dealing with stuff on the doorstep with complaints, and we have a central number that people can ring up and make complaints and praise to. I mean, we actually get tweets asking when's roadworks coming to our street because they want that infrastructure that goes along with it. So it's not all bad, but we do accept that there is some disruption, and that's why we work closely with the council.
Yes, just to add to that, we're in terms of your question around what regulation is in place, so there are laws that we all have to abide by. SROH and NRSWA are two of them. Like any other utility, we have to abide by those, and the council have got a job to hold us to account if we don't. But as Steve said, this is a massive, massive job. Don't underestimate, this is like laying the sewers again, the water pipes again. We've got to get this fibre out to every single property out there. And just to give you an example of the scale, in York now, we're just coming to the end of the programme there. We've laid about 2.5 million metres of fibre in the streets of York, which is an ancient Roman city, and you can imagine the job that we've had in doing that over the last 5 years. So it's no mean undertaking, but we go above and beyond. We work with the council very closely, we come to regular meetings with them, but we also engage really closely with the community. As I put it, educate, excite, inform people before we turn up so they know why their streets are being dug up. And we find then, as Steve said, more often than not, they welcome us when we get there, because what they want is the service at the back end of it, and they forgive us a little bit for some of the disruption. Not everyone does. Some people don't enjoy it at all, but you can't make an omelette without breaking a few eggs along the way, unfortunately.
Any more questions? No? So the only other thing I wanted to just go back to is what Andrew was mentioning, was about the link to skills, really. So it's really important that we're actually having, this massive piece of work that's going on in Kirklees. It's happening here perhaps before many other major towns and cities. So how are we going to make sure that our people benefit from it? So from the point where the cables are laid, making sure that local people are benefiting from that. Obviously, you've raised some concerns already about we might not have all the skills at the moment to be able to meet the demand of the work. But then also longer term, given that we've got Channel 4 coming into Leeds, so close to Dewsbury, Backline, Huddersfield, but particularly for North Kirklees. And also then looking at the other side, we've obviously got the access through to Media City as well. There's potentially some great benefits for us, isn't there? And that's not quite laid out yet. I guess from what you're saying is that we will get there. We've got the technology strategy, but we've got to move quickly, haven't we? Because everyone's going to be vying for it. So unless we're more collaborative at that West Yorkshire level, which I hope we will be, everyone's going to be running in trying to get that benefit. So how do we ensure that we don't we don't miss out really.
I absolutely agree. We've said that over the next 12 months, the Digital Inclusion Group will do certain things, work with partners and key stakeholders to develop a coordinated and strategic approach to tackling digital inclusion. We'll deliver a consistent digital inclusion message to key stakeholders. We'll develop a clear position on as to how broadband suppliers can best support the Kirklees approach. Bearing in mind still, repeating the point that some of the 5G suppliers, they're not here to talk to yet in a sense, but and influence and maximise existing funding for digital skills. Yet part of that is definitely working with partners. We have the West Yorkshire Combined Authority. You've heard from Chris earlier about social value outcomes, and so there's a lot to do there. We're asking for the next 12 months to develop our digital inclusion programme to the point where we're getting some tangible outcomes and results from that. And I think that's all we can do realistically, because it is talking to these guys, but it's also talking about the 5G suppliers as well, and working with those organisations like Enable and other people to achieve some of that stuff. So we've got a plan set out. We also ought to bear in mind, really, obviously it was only last year that really the programme's fully started. So I think at this stage where we are, by way of an update, a year on from the last scrutiny, we've got our strategy, we've got our governance, we've got some resources established in the council, we're working with our suppliers, and we've got a forward work programme. And so I guess my plea is 12 months' time, and then ask us some more challenging questions around some of those areas. But it's in view, which is important. So hopefully I've managed to get that across in terms of that we've got a programme that is looking at these issues.
I think I'll just add one thing to that. And I think we've always been quite ambitious in Kirklees. We have actually got an incredibly good reputation, both regionally and nationally, in terms of how we've managed to attract investment. And as far as I'm aware, we're probably the first council to really be looking at the opportunity across Kirklees from the Network Rail infrastructure. So we're going to be tapping into that. It's half built already, so we're actually going to be lighting that up quite soon, hopefully. And that is just a proof of concept for me. There is so much opportunity all the way from Marsden, Slough into town, through to Mirfield, Ravensthorpe, Batley, and so on, Dewsbury. So that capability is there. It'll land into Leeds City Centre at one side, where you've got Channel 4. Unfortunately, it lands in Manchester Piccadilly, which is a couple of miles short of Media City, but the opportunity is there. This genuinely is exciting times, and we are trying to at least prove those concepts, so we're opening up that capability. So when we talk about the redevelopment of Huddersfield Town Centre and the sound space, as for example, it's let's start from underground and get that right and get that capacity and infrastructure in from the start. So it's all good news, hopefully.
I think what I would say is probably don't underestimate how much the businesses that we deal with already are looking forward to and embracing the technology where it is. We have a close relationship with the university. We're talking about projects with local manufacturers for Industry 4.0, which is a big thing for Kirklees and Huddersfield, industrialisation of manufacturing and digitisation of manufacturing, rather. So there is a lot that's already in discussion, and that will kind of percolate through to those digital skills as those projects come to a head. So I would say continue to work with those strategic partners of the college and universities and chambers of commerce and LEP, and I think that's really positive. There's probably just another point to make you aware of the fact that we have a strategic partnership with 3 to deliver 5G across our 50 cities. So there is, and we build 5G capability into the cities that we build in readiness for that. We provide a great deal of capacity to future-proof the network. That's why we can be a little slower than other builders, but we're doing it because we see this for a very long game and to bring all of those benefits into our cities as a result.
Yeah, the only thing I'd add to that is, there's a couple of points have been made this evening. This isn't about the technology. It really isn't about the technology. We like to get excited about fibre and the boxes that plug in the end of it, but most people out there are just interested in what you can actually do with it. And so I came from a session this morning where we were getting together with the public sector and the local Chamber of Commerce to decide, once we've laid this and it's there, how do they then attract those creative and digital media type industries? How do they compete them with the larger cities that surrounding them in order to make the most of that network? And that's what it's about, really, isn't it? Yeah.
You're right, that's vital for us going forward, isn't it? So hopefully in 12 months' time there'll be more on it. So thank you very much. It's really, I think it is really exciting. I could sit here and talk about this for 5 hours, but obviously I think everyone needs to go home, don't they? But exciting plans, and we'll keep seeing you here. Okay. So again in a year's time, probably. Yeah. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks, Chris. Members, sorry, I forgot to mention the work programme. Does anyone want to say anything about the work programme? That's at the back of the papers. No, you don't have to. Okay, sorry, I just forgot to mention it. So there is a work programme at the back. So we've got another couple of meetings coming up, and then we start thinking about the programme for next year as well. Okay? All right, thank you.